Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. We're delighted to have you joining us for our third and final session of the future of human connectivity. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Facebook, Nokia, and Qualcomm, for their support of today's program. Today we've heard from the FCC chairman, tech innovators, 5G experts, city officials, and more. Now you will get to see some of the people at the forefront of innovation in our ultra-connected world. They are designers of cutting-edge wearables and fast movers. Before we get started, though, a friendly reminder. You can join the conversation by tweeting us at #TheHillConnects. We are broadcasting live, and we're going to be taking your questions. I even have some of your questions from the last session ready to go. Again, if you experience any trouble with the live stream, please refresh the page. That should do the trick. And my producer says she wants me to stop saying that it does not work. We'll see. My next guest is founder and CEO of Lumia, an e-textiles company crafting materials used in wearable technology and more. She's a Forbes 30 Under 30 member, and she is fusing the worlds of tech and fashion. She may be the first real 5G entrepreneur in that space that I have met and talked to. So welcome, Madison Maxey. It's great to be with you. I've been reading about Lumia. I'm fascinated. Wearables, heating elements. But why don't you describe in your own words what Lumia does? We've been talking about this whole new hyper-connected world where it's not just the Internet of Things, but we are connected to that. And you're the first entrepreneur that I'm speaking to that really is making something of that.
Great. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me. I think especially when we talk about wearables, we're talking about the final use case and the outcome in the product. And something that we really focus on at Lumia are the core materials. So we focus on ways to make things that are soft and flexible also behave like circuitry. And, of course, things like 5G are an important tool in making connected devices. Raw materials are also an important tool in making connected devices. So we're really excited to be doing our part on the material side of making these products more of a reality.
Can you walk us through some of the products you've developed and maybe share with us the context for them and what products you're bringing online and where people can buy them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing is that, my background's in fashion. A lot of people think e-textiles and they think fashion and they think apparel, but our best applications are actually not in the fashion space. Actually now exclusively on, not working with fashion companies. So with that, most of our customers are industrial customers, some automotive customers, and I can't share too much about what we're doing for them. But I think one really cool example of an e-textile that you use every day is a car seat heater. It's generally a wire attached to a very flexible substrate. So there's lots of things in our daily lives that already take advantage of soft, flexible circuitry. And the better that we make these materials, the more that we can do, whether that's, better steering wheel heating, better car seat heating, better industrial, uniforms or industrial robotics, and are able to add sensing to them. Another category is outdoor wear. So better heated jackets, better heated gloves. I think all of these things really benefit from good foundational e-textile products.
I think it sounds like a fascinating world, and I don't mean this in any critique or negative way. Sometimes I feel like I need digital free days. I go use cash, I leave my cell phone at home, and I have a 2001 GMC truck that has no, trackable devices in it. And I just feel like getting away. Do you feel like we have to make a trade-off as we move into this world of connectivity where lights come on when we're there, or, our clothes warm up in certain conditions, is there something that we're losing about ourselves and our privacy and all of that we should worry about, or am I just an old fogey? And you're welcome to say that.
I'm a millennial, but I don't understand the TikTok. I'm not on a lot of social media. Personally, the applications that we're most excited about really aren't meant to attach you to a screen. You can make a heated jacket that's controlled by an iPhone app that forces you to look at your screen more, or you can make a heated jacket that has a simple button to turn it on so that you keep your head up. And we're definitely a fan of more of these screenless user interfaces as much as possible. So I think that with thoughtful design, we don't have to make a trade-off. I have a sample actually of our material here.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay, let's pause here. What is this?
So this is our multi-function demonstrator, and what the demonstrator does is it shows off 3 functionalities that we can get into a really thin, flexible, circuit substrate. You can see we have some lights here. We have heating. Oh, it's reversed. We have heating over here. This gets to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we have a capacitive touch area here. So in the capacitive touch area, when you touch the material, it changes the function of the lights. So, this is just a demonstration of the materiality and functions that we can develop. But, nothing here needs a screen. So I think that there are definitely applications that don't force us to be more connected than we already are.
I found it fascinating, and I know that you're also, have thought a little bit about how some of these devices can be useful in the healthcare space. What are some of those applications?
Yeah, there are quite a few, or one of my favorite, I should say, and this isn't a project that we've worked on, but are these sleeves for muscular stimulation. So if you have some sort of paralysis or disconnect basically between your nerves and your muscular response, so thinking you want something to happen or feeling something on your skin and not having it actually make your body move, there are these really cool videos of sleeves that you put on where your muscles are stimulated by the wearable in order to give you back your function, in order to close that loop. And I think that that's one of the coolest examples in wearables of something that you couldn't do with another device, but you could do with a wearable that's really adding to quality of life. It's not, just like a nice add-on that isn't necessarily helping anyone. I also think that wearable EKG is a really great example. A friend of mine when I was in college had heart issues, and every day she had to wear all of these patches all over her body that were really uncomfortable and hard to use in a lot of ways. So just having a shirt that you can put on that gives you those medical readings, I think is a simple example of how you can make something better for a patient by having it in a more wearable form factor.
Years ago, and I guess I'm able to say this, is that Intel Corporation had this kind of special place that you could go look at stuff they were playing with. It wasn't necessarily something they were going to bring to market, but they had, what intrigued me, so I'm going to give them credit, but I don't know what they've done since with this technology, is that they had a rug, and that they found that you could leave a rug in a person's home, and that by knowing that person's behavior and walking on that rug, they could tell when that person was likely to be building up to a stroke. And I just found it the weirdest thing. Like, I didn't understand the technology or how it happened, but it really impressed me that that's also a different form of interactivity with technology in our everyday circumstances. And I guess the question I have there is, is there a clearinghouse for these things? Do you go to a club of like smart wearables? How do you all know what's kind of cooking, if you will, out there? Because this happened. This was years ago when I saw this, and I said, "Wow, this is going to be a very different world." And I don't think we're there right now. I think if I mentioned a rug that people walked across, it will tell you when you're having a stroke, many people would be very surprised. But some of the things that you're showing right now are very much in that ilk. And so it just feels like the future is here, but many of us don't know it yet.
Oh, yeah. I think that's one of the most confusing things about the wearables or e-textile space is that, these products feel very familiar because they're often textile based, or like a rug is a great example. So you see a demo working and you think that it's solved and it's ready. But in reality, these demos are often held together by some chewing gum, and they're not really ready for production. So the process of getting something through to production and used by a general consumer, it can take years. It takes a really long time. And so because of that, there's kind of this gap between what we might see a demonstration of and what actually is going to work in our homes and for our own personal needs. So, in terms of what's possible, I think, of course, looking online is a great place to see use cases or events like what you went to. But when it comes to what's actually going to get to market and what are the beachhead applications for this industry. I think it's all about looking at the core technologies. If you look at something online and nobody mentions the battery, it could be plugged into a wall, and until you actually fix the battery size and function, it's never going to be something that's portable and easy to use. So there are all these kind of like stop gaps from things actually getting fully to market. But I think the industry is really working on it. Groups like IPC and ATCC, which are standards agencies, are all working on standards around this space. And as we get more standards, the easier it is for things to get to market. And you mentioned a club where these people are. I've met so many people in this industry working on standards. So it's kind of a cool place to be at the foundation of something.
Are you marketing and selling these products now? I should know that before I started interviewing, but I don't. Are you selling things at this moment?
Yeah, so we don't have a product on the market. The way that we work is that we customize our patented technology for other companies. And so we create a part that goes into their use case, and then they bring the product to market. So because a lot of the applications we work on are more on the industrial side, they take a really long time to go to market.
So it's a little bit like Lumia inside.
That's exactly what it is. We've said we want to be like the Gore-Tex of textiles, that part that is part of the final product, but we don't make the final product ourselves.
So what is the best-selling product that you're inside right now?
Yeah, a lot of the products, again, because they're industrial applications, they haven't come to market yet. We spent about 3 years working on the research and development for the product, and it was really around the beginning of last year when we started working on these integration scopes. So for example, if you want something to be in a car, it's 4 to 5 years from starting the project to actually get it in a car. So I wouldn't be able to tell you the best-selling product because we're not in something that's on the market yet.
Well, look, we're in a time right now where there's a time of like great trauma in the country, right? We spent a lot of time talking about the economic hardships, the health hardships, vulnerable communities, the racial protests going on in the country. But when I talk to innovators out there, they're sort of scrambling, and many of them, not all of them, many of them are just changing so rapidly. And we're doing an event with The Hill tomorrow called, it's going to focus on small business. And I almost hate the term small business. I want to say new business, fresh business, ventures, things that are there, because I don't want to kind of, look at this. But in these times of crisis, I just like to, get in your head, have people hear how you are innovating in this kind of traumatic moment, if any of this stuff is hitting you at all.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely does. So, we work on projects with other companies and a lot of big companies, and their innovation budgets go when there are times of crisis. And that's how we get brought on to a project. So it's definitely impacted us. And, the first thing that we did when we saw how long-term these impacts could be was we started thinking, okay, what if we always wanted to do that we never had time for? And so we started actually developing a new set of products that's meant more for a maker and an engineering market that hopefully we'll be able to, bring out sometime next year if all of the testing goes well. But we just tried to look at it as an opportunity to develop something that we normally just wouldn't have the time for because we'd be busy with our customers and working on things for them. But I think your note about small business is also really interesting because a small business can have 99 people. To me, that's not a small business. That's not necessarily new either. So it's very interesting how those definitions can be so misleading.
So just a final question, because I'm fascinated with people who really create new stuff. Do you have any things that you're going to be thinking about trying to create 5 years? I know you've done this stuff now and you're going to try and move this in, but what's the next wave of the Lumia contribution to society?
That's a good question. I hope that at some point, if we do well and we have the opportunity, it would be great to actually go and make those products that you've asked about. So, not just work through other companies, but at some point, maybe make that, heating jacket that we've talked about so much, or that medical sleeve, make the whole thing. So I think that that's the long term in the future. If we had all the time and money, that would be a cool thing to go after.
Well, sign me up. I love the name Lumia. So Madison Maxey, founder and CEO of Lumia, thank you for taking this in because, again, I think the connectivity that we have of lots of gadgets and things to each other is also going to include us, and you're an entrepreneur in that space. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
And now for a sponsor perspective portion of our program. Before we get underway, a quick clarification. This interview is being conducted by me, and these are my questions. It's my stuff, but this content should not be considered editorial. With that, I'm now joined by my friend Brian Hendricks, Vice President on Policy and Public Affairs for Nokia Americas, one of the smartest, iconic guys in this business. And I have to say, and this is not a commercial, but there's a point where as we talk about smart cities and critical infrastructure and this coming world of 5G, Nokia will be synonymous with that, or it already is, basically. But I'm just sort of interested, Brian, as you look at deploying this next generation of connectivity out there, what is the biggest mistake we can make?
Well, thank you for the commercial, Steve. I appreciate the commentary and for the invitation to come back and be with you again. I think that the biggest mistake would be for us to not take this opportunity to pause and have some humility about what we think we know and what information we don't have about the connectivity issues. I say that because we've spent something on the order of $25 billion over the last 5 years on trying to remediate this pernicious multi-technology generation problem of connectivity, lack of access, lack of uptake. And even when you look at and grant the benefit of every doubt to the FCC's data, which I think is probably undercounting dramatically the problem, we still have a very, very long way to go. And we're at the early deployment stage of 5G, which, as you noted with past guests today, is going to be transformational. So missing populations is going to be much more consequential now than it has been in the past. You're not just going to miss out on faster streaming for Netflix and greater download speeds for your internet traffic. You're going to miss out on transformational things like remote diagnostic healthcare, et cetera. And that would be an enormous mistake. It actually could lead to a widening of the digital divide, and that would be an epic mistake. So we need to pause and recognize there's a lot of missing information on why we have this problem.
So how would you approach it? Because, to a certain degree, you're basically saying we've thrown a lot of money at problems. We started today's forum with an interview between my editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack, and Ajit Pai, the chairman of the FCC. And Chairman Pai said, we need to reach rural communities, and the technology is going to help us to do that. Larry Irving, who is also part of this debate and dialogue, came out and said, well, we've got populations in cities. So right there, we had a kind of debate that you've said we're just throwing money at, and we need to get smarter. So how do we get smarter?
Yeah, so I took a long bike ride this morning, and as I was riding, I was actually thinking if there was an analogy to explain what I mean about lack of data. And the one I came up with, maybe it's imperfect, is this. When you first start learning to do math as a child, and I have a 5-year-old, it's pretty basic stuff, right? It's 4 + 4 is always 8. But as you move along, you get more and more sophisticated. They teach you to do things like solve for an unknown variable, and on it goes. The one thing you never learn is how do you solve a complex equation when literally every variable is either unknown or unreliable. And with the broadband connectivity problem, that's kind of where we are. We do not know, for example, fully where the infrastructure actually exists and where it does not. The mapping needs bad reforming. So we are unreliable in terms of where the physical infrastructure exists. We know things about demographic patterns and uptake and adoption, but within that, we don't know enough about whether or not those are consumer preferences, whether some of those folks who don't adopt it because they have access to broadband at work, and how much of that may be affordability of either the subscription fee or the devices that are necessary to be be able to access and fully leverage the technology. So it has to begin by having better information. And unfortunately, I don't think, based on my time in Washington, this is necessarily a Washington out problem to solve. On your last program, I talked about creating a digital connectivity commission to take a look at this, and I referenced the 9/11 commission. But as I thought about it more and looked, there have been many examples where we have actually gone outside the Washington environment and created commissions of experts from a variety of disciplines, academics, practitioners, in this case, educators, healthcare professionals, who be able to actually tell us what's happening on the ground with COVID, where lack of connectivity has been an issue. My son's school district has access, apparently, to information other people don't, because it's been able to create a program where a laptop and a tablet will be in the hands of every child for remote learning the first 9 weeks of school. They're creating community Wi-Fi hotspots. So creating a commission where you have real folks who are addressing those problems and may have some of that information and data feed back a series of recommendations to Washington to kind of expand the options box. I'm not suggesting the money we've spent has been wasted. What I am suggesting is that when you're spending that kind of money and you're continuing to see that level of connectivity challenge, you're not getting high yield for your money. And so it's probably time to expand the options box.
Well, I mean, it's also fascinating. I mean, it could be a commission. It also sounds like a show and tell clearinghouse, because this came up, with Mike Rogers earlier from 5G Action Now, saying, hey, there are some cities that are not leaning in on this. There's some that are. He didn't name them. I tried hard to push him to say who are the recalcitrant ones. But it raises this really interesting question, which is, and I think we've been struggling with it all day. You've laid out a lot of our, lack of knowledge, a lot of data, but there's another side where there is a possible new and different strategic leap into a very different world. And 5G, it's a number and a letter. And I've been trying to say, it's Internet of Things, it's connectivity, it's quantum computing, it's data being dealt with in ways, it's a lot of stuff. And this ought to empower us as opposed to run over us. And that's what I've been trying to get out today. So as Nokia looks at it, as you meet with governors and you meet with mayors and you meet with other corporate partners and social leaders, how do you describe the promise of 5G that Nokia is trying to deliver?
So real quick before I answer that, because that's a great question, I think what I'm describing about better data is about helping to elevate these debates out of the more doctrinaire discussions about, we want free markets, we want reverse auctions, we want and take them to actually diagnosing what the problems are and then starting to map to a different solution sets. Because I think what you're ultimately going to find is that you'll have different technology solutions that will work for different communities based on, business cases that can be squared, how much money may be necessary, and through what channels, whether you work it from the demand side, where you help with affordability and device access, or whether you have access in certain communities to those things, but not to the actual physical network. So it's about being flexible enough to recognize that one technology is not going to solve the problem. Much as I'd love to tell you it's wireless 5G, that won't work in every place. It may be low Earth orbit satellites, it may be fiber, it may be different things. So information gives you more ability to map to realistic options, including things like municipal broadband, et cetera. But to your question, I would say when we talk about what 5G can accomplish, we have to start talking about what the technology can enable, and then actually provide some realistic scenarios. And one of the challenges with LTE is we told everybody, this is great, this is wonderful, it's super fast. And people said, yeah, but I mean, what am I going to get that I didn't get with the 3G connection? And we started to hear that with 5G as well, where people were like, well, yeah, I'm just going to get faster internet. And we did a really bad job as an industry and helping to understand that with lower latency, and I mean very, very low latency, 5 nines of reliability and enormous capacity, you begin to do things that you couldn't do before, like create automated factories and manage, logistics businesses and provide things like I mentioned remote diagnostic healthcare. If you consider, for example, that right now, even before COVID, you had problems with veterans who live a couple hundred miles away from a serving hospital, right? Or maybe not ambulatory. We had talked about how 5G might be a technology where, and your previous guest was talking about this, where with the advances in wearables, and if you can ensure a connection, a reliable connection with sufficient bandwidth and low latency, you can have real-time telemetry relayed to doctors hundreds of miles away, greatly expanding what you can do in rural diagnostic healthcare. These are things that require a better, more reliable connection, and that's what we're going to bring. The options for what will happen. I mean, every time we've tried to guess in every previous generation of technology, we've been wildly wrong, at least as far as the people who build the networks. We think we know what it can enable. We don't know what innovators will do. But the one thing that is absolutely certain is that this will be transformational. And if you miss out on having access to that thing, you will miss out on a great deal more than you have missed out on in previous generations of technology. And we simply can't permit that.
This is going to sound like a meta question, but I love talking to you because I get these glimpses of what the future will look like. But I know it's not hard. It's hard to get there, and it's rare to have someone as introspective as you say, "Hey, we get things wrong. Let's just not throw money at it." It's rare in Washington. But when I was involved in the early days of the New America Foundation, and we had some staff there, this is 1999. We were looking at that time. People don't remember this, but the internet was new. And the internet's impact on lawyers or on farming or on we actually had a grant from the Markle Foundation trying to sort of raise how the internet might change people's daily lives. And we had to kind of frame it for them. I mean, that was only 1999. So, I sort of feel like we're getting back into into a new area where, as you said, we don't know what innovator is going to do, but it's going to be, we're going to have, just a different platform out there. So let me ask you, you've mentioned not having the data, of worrying that we're going to make different bets, but what would help you beyond that? What would help you take the United States into a better course? What are the missing pieces of that you need?
So jogging domestically, I think there are, I'm sure throughout the day, I haven't caught all of the program. We need to have a robust spectrum across a variety of bands in our business to make sure that we have the full range of spectrum tools to choose from when you're trying to construct a network. And they all have different propagation characteristics. Some will work well, helping address the urban core. Some will not. We don't currently have that. We're working towards it. It's happened a little bit more slowly than we would like, but we're on a good path. But the appetite for spectrum is insatiable. And so one of the things that we've been advocating is taking a look at ways by supporting R&D, not just in Open RAN technologies, which we fully support, but also in foundational 6G and even yet in 5G. There are things that we can do that can deal us more options on the spectrum supply. Quick example, I've mentioned, we have these debates all the time. They're not so much debates as they are really ugly fights between the commercial sector and the government that has reserved spectrum about how can we share, and we need to throw you out in order to have it. And they haven't been very productive discussions. It takes far too long to liberate that spectrum. So investing in something like end-to-end secure network slicing and accelerating that roadmap might let us actually build a network in a band currently occupied by a federal agency, create a slice for them that they can operate, and they can design the security on it. And that can actually change the dimension of these conversations from a binary choice between I get it or you keep it into something that's win-win. So we may need some more R&D support to accelerate that. And because there isn't necessarily a commercial business case for it, but it's clearly something that would help immeasurably as you think 3, 4, 5 years down the road when we get past the initial 5G build, we're going to need more spectrum. So there's that. And then I think, we just can't be doctrinaire about solutions and technologies. And I understand why we have debates at the FCC all the time about wanting to have high aspirational speeds, throughput, up and down link. But as a practical matter, when you change those speeds and you set really high aspirational speeds that may be beyond what's necessary, for some of the technologies I'm talking about, you change the business case in ways that actually takes us backwards. So I think everybody just needs to be more flexible and open-minded, and we need to consider all the different kinds of technology that can be brought here. You've got a lot of things coming online we've never had before, like low Earth orbit satellite, SpaceX Starlink system. So there's a lot of choices. We just have to be willing to, as I said, have some humility and recognize it can't just keep doing the things we've done in the past, because 25 billion over the last 5 years, we're still looking at 25 million unconnected people, and that's not great yield. So we should try to expand the options box is all I'm really saying. I think the commission concept holds a lot of value, because that can, away from the lobbyists, including myself in Washington, to be able to get these inputs and put recommendations back on the table, and I'll just put in one more plug, which is to say, I'm sure people throughout the day have talked about the issue with the small rural wireless companies that need to replace a lot of equipment in their networks. At this point, Congress is beyond negligent and derelict in not providing them with the money to make that happen. If they don't do that soon, and they're going to be required to replace that equipment at great cost, or stick with equipment that may not be maintained, you're actually going to exacerbate this connectivity problem. So that is a separate plug from what we've been talking about, but that one's plainly right in front of us, where we have to fix that, and they're not moving fast enough on that.
I'm really happy you put a punctuation point on that. That has come up earlier today, but not with that emphasis, so I'm really grateful. Brian, I love talking to you, and I think that it's great to have someone as introspective as you are on this, and I really appreciate Nokia's support of today's fantastic program. But I hope you'll come back and talk to us more about our workforce, how our lives are going to change, and these issues of how to get that commission or that way to collect data, whether it's in DC or it's elsewhere in the nation, set up, because I think these are really important contributions to the conversation. Thank you very much, Brian Hendricks, Vice President of Public Policy and Public Affairs for Nokia Americas. Thanks for joining us. My final guest of the day is bending the concept of space and time. Jay Walder, the CEO of Virgin Hyperloop, is leading the effort to rewrite what's possible in public transit. As I told you earlier today, I want to travel in a tube, and this is a bucket list moment for me. The proposed Hyperloop transportation system is 3 times faster than a high-speed rail. And I think it's actually a lot faster than that in my personal view, and 10 times as fast as a traditional rail system. Just last week, the Department of Transportation took a major step toward the regulation and deployment of Hyperloop technology. Jay Walder, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. We're talking about human connectivity, and a lot of it's been around cell phones and 5G, but I've been wanting to talk about Hyperloop for years. I think it's fascinating. Can you explain to our audience, first of all, what we're talking about? Because it's not Disneyland, it's real.
It is real, and look, Steve, I love you saying this, and we're all dealing with everything that's going on right now, and we're learning to do things like this, but mobility and connectivity and the way in which we're going to be able to do that hasn't changed. We need that. We're desperate for that, right? So that is a big part of what we're going to have on a going forward basis. I think the second part of it, and look, I'm going to speak to this. Most of my career has really been in transportation systems. I've had the good fortune to run 3 of the largest transportation systems in the world in New York and Hong Kong and London. But we're at a point where we're going to need new ideas, and Hyperloop is right here. And it's right now, and it's something that we can do. It's something we are doing, and it's something that we can make mainstream, and it's really, really exciting.
In this moment, where there's a lot of economic stress in the nation, there's a lot of course, we're fighting a health scare, and we've also got a lot of divides in our society. You and I had a conversation recently, and I was really impressed with it. You said you can either think incrementally or you can think big. How do you maintain the discipline of not getting trapped into incremental thinking?
Well, I think this is the beauty of this. Look, I'm usually proud of the things that I've been able to do. But look, if you go,
why don't you share? You should share with our audience some of the things that you've done.
Well, look, you go in and I joined a little over a decade ago. I joined the New York MTA as the chairman and CEO of that company. And now you're talking about the largest transportation authority in the United States. We're talking about nearly 10 million rides a day in thinking about that. But the fact of the matter is that so much of what you do is defined by decisions that were taken before you. In the case of the New York MTA, it's the tunnels were dug more than 100 years ago to be able to do that. The beauty of what we're talking about with Hyperloop is that we really are starting with a clean sheet of paper. And as much as I appreciate the point that you made up front about speed, and we will run 3 times as fast as high-speed rail, that's the case. But as much as I think about speed, what I really think about this is that we're defining a new paradigm of the way that transportation can and should work. And it's working the way that fits with the way we live our lives today. I think that's a really, really big aspect of what's going on here. So what do I mean by that? So much of what we imagine about the way that rail transportation works, for example, was defined by the constraints that existed in literally the 1800s in doing it. Today, when we think about Hyperloop, we think about small vehicles operating with electromagnetic propulsion, super fast, super smooth, riding on a bed of air. So you'll be able to hold a cup of coffee even at the highest speeds. But it's more than that, right? If we think about trains, what we've done is we have what I refer to as the tyranny of schedules. There's almost nothing in our life today where we expect and accept that kind of schedule. Everything else in our life, we expect to be able to go when we want to go. We expect to be able to go where we want to go. We want to be able to push a button and make it happen. That's what Hyperloop wants to do as well. Direct to destination, on demand, to be able to do this. And so we're not just changing the way that you think about speed, but we're actually changing the way that we think about you interacting with a mass transportation system. This literally is the first new form of mass transportation in 100 years. And we have that ability to think out of the box. And one of the most difficult challenges that I have over and over again is, in fact, asking people to stay out of that box, to not necessarily define their imagination by the things that they know or have done, but let's actually define our imagination by what could be in front of us in a different way. And we're proving to them that we can do that.
I buy your point, and I love the notion of, a new mass transportation system. But when I'm stuck on the Beltway or an LA freeway, I still think about speed. But let me ask you, because we do have a film clip that I'd love my team to pull up, because I know you took this out to sort of demonstrate to people the pod. So tell us about it.
Well, actually, you're now looking at what we call DevLoop. It is the first full-scale Hyperloop that's been built in the world. It exists about half an hour outside of Las Vegas in the desert out there. And to me, this is what you're watching right now is one of the most special things, because it is no longer about computer-aided graphics. It's no longer about thinking about what this would be in a science fiction novel. This exists. It's real. We've run over 400 tests at DevLoop right there. It's a 500-meter tube, and it's really, really special. For me, this is it was the inspiration, frankly, that had me join the company. When I was being recruited to do this, and I wondered, is this actually something that fits with me? I'm a guy who runs transportation systems. Does this actually fit? And when I went out to DevLoop, when I actually saw what had been done, when I engaged with it, I realized that we can make this happen now. And that's why it's so special and it's so exciting.
So how far away is it? And I don't mean to put pressure on you, but I'm going to anyway. We are in a terrible crisis, and we have 44 million people unemployed. No matter what happens with the vaccine, things coming back, it's going to take a while to bring people back and train them to get the workers. Is there any prospect that the transportation infrastructure you're bringing online can become part of that backbone of a rejuvenated America that puts people back to work again?
Absolutely. And look, I mean, one of the things, and I hate to use the phrase silver lining when it comes to a crisis, a pandemic that's cost 150,000 lives in our country. So I don't want to use it in that way. But one of the things that it is causing us to do is to think differently about what's there. The old normal will not be there. There is a new normal that we will be going to. And I think what's exciting about this, and unfortunately, crises do have the opportunity space of being able to think differently than we have thought before. What are we talking about now? We will be reinvesting in our country. We should be doing that, no question. But it's our opportunity not to just invest in looking in the rearview mirror. It's our opportunity to invest by looking forward about what we can do. How do we make the infrastructure investments that will actually provide the platform of productivity, efficiency, and jobs for the 21st century? How do we put forward the things that will, in fact, give us the industry that allows us to be able to build for our country and on an exportable basis to be able to do that? I love the idea that Hyperloop is a big part of that. I think it will be a big part of that. Here's an example of this. Spirit Aerosystems. Spirit is a company in Wichita, Kansas. They've been building fuselages and other parts of airplanes. They do a lot of work with Boeing and other airplane manufacturers. It's no secret. They've been incredibly hard hit by this crisis. We started working with Spirit and announced a partnership with them just a few weeks ago, in which they are building some of the structure for the pod that we're going to use in Hyperloop. And now we're working with them on something that is tiny compared to the hundreds, thousands of airplanes that they've built. But what's exciting about it is that they see this as a step forward, looking at what they can be able to do. And this is replicable all over the country. It's replicable to be able to take skills that we have in different areas and bring them into Hyperloop to be able to do this. It's replicable to be able to repurpose facilities that may no longer have purposes for their original space. This is the moment, and that's what's really, really great about it.
The Department of Transportation, Elaine Chao, just put out a letter, a newsletter, not a newsletter, but a letter, a document that essentially laid out some guidelines, some funny things, mentioning Hyperloop. What's going on, in Hyperloop's prospects with U.S. government support and partnership?
Well, first of all, let me give enormous credit to the secretary. A little over a year ago, she formed what was called the Net Council for non-traditional emerging transportation technologies. And the underlying message there, and one, frankly, that goes across all political spectrums, is that our country has not done a very good job of being able to develop and bring forward new transportation technology. And part of the challenge of that is, how do you get out of a modal basis of being able to do it? If you walk into the US DOT building, you almost immediately fall into the Federal Railway Administration, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, et cetera, in doing it. And when you take something like Hyperloop, it cuts across a number of different areas in doing this. She set the council up a year and a half ago. She gave it a mandate to be able to work forward and to think about how the department should be setting up to be able to do this. And the secretary came back last week with an incredible set of announcements that really showed the guidelines that the Net Council has to be able to support and to be able to work with new technologies. And within that, and we're very, very pleased about that, the secretary and many of the speakers noted that Hyperloop was a key priority. It's one of the most exciting things that are there. What's super important about what you came forth with? Really two things that I would say. First off, they've defined the regulatory path for Hyperloop. So many people, or investors, other people have said to us, well, how does this get regulated? And the secretary and the Net Council stood up very clearly and said, Hyperloop fits in the boundaries of the Federal Railway Administration. It already has the congressional basis for magnetic levitation, and we fit within that basis. That's great. We're thrilled, and we now have a place to be able to work within the U.S. Department of Transportation to do that. Second, what the secretary and the DOT staff confirmed is that Hyperloop now is accepted as a mode of transportation. It has the same ability to be able to access federal grants and federal loan programs as more established forms of transportation. So we're now moving into a space where we're saying, yes, the federal government can invest in this and can help in the planning and the development of new routes to be able to do this. So an enormous announcement. I mean, I can't, I sometimes struggle to be able to clearly define and explain why, but for a company like ours, as a startup with about 250 people in the company, to have a very clear path forward now, to have the United States government actually saying, hey, we want to support this. We want private ingenuity. We want private investment. We want creativity. We want entrepreneurship. And we know we have a role to do in doing that, and standing up and taking that position and saying we want to do it. And further confirming that as we look now to build forward, to be able to do the things that we need to be able to do, that Hyperloop should be able to access federal funding and federal programs in the same way as other more traditional modes is just an enormous leap forward. And so we're thrilled by it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. You know, oftentimes I get letters and memos from government, and they're sleep devices for me. But this felt like something very unique and special. Secretary Chow's letter. Jay, just a final question. I'm going to ask you to take your Hyperloop hat off because I know you're deeply into that, 24/7 Hyperloop man. If you were to take a wrecking ball to another part of the American transportation system and recreate it, what would it be?
I think we really need to reimagine the mobility within our cities. I think we gave away so much of the urban space to automobiles, and I think we have to create the infrastructure and the safety to have forms of mobility that move differently, whether those are scooters, whether those are bicycles, whether there are other modes of being able to do it. One of the points I didn't mention in my career, I just before I came to Hyperloop, I had joined with a group of investors to take over a bicycle share company, and we built it into the largest bicycle share company in the United States. City Bike, which is the flagship of that, the bicycle share program in New York, last year hit over 100,000 rides a day, and that's extraordinary. And what we're really proving is that people want mobility with the flexibility to do that. But we have to provide the safe ways within cities to allow people to do that. I think the opportunity to see not 100,000 rides a day in a city like New York, but 500,000 rides a day is right in front of us right now. And I hope that in cities all over the world that we will take that opportunity to be able to do it. That is another here and now moment for us right now.
Jay, I hope we get more time to come back again. This was the anchor interview that I most wanted to do today. I'm fascinated by your vision and what's out there, and I want to be one of the early people who get to take part of your great work. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jay Walder, CEO of Virgin Hyperloop One. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Terrific. Well, that brings us to the end of our Connectivity Summit. For those of you who watched all 3 hours, I hope you gain new insight into the future of our connected world. This is an incredible day. I'm always fascinated. I feel like I get a master class and all these great things going on. For those who missed out on some sessions, the entire program will be posted to the Hill Events page shortly. I'd like to thank Facebook, Nokia, and Qualcomm for their support of today's program, and a big shout out to all of you attendees as well. I'm Steve Clemens, signing off.